Hello BookTube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome to my channel, Bouquins and Books. In today's video, I will simply talk about what I have read in the past 2 weeks. So it's a Friday Reads video, but for 2 weeks, so since the beginning of December. December for me is Cloak and Dagger Christmas. It's the main readathon that I am following in December. And for that, I started with Brother Cadfael. Now, this book is an omnibus with the 3 volumes, three books. I'm going to call this a tome, and in the tome there are 3 books. So the first book I had read in February, March, I don't know, earlier this year. And so I read the second book in this tome. And the second book is The Leper of St. Giles. And I figured it out. I don't normally, sometimes I don't care. Sometimes I just read for the story and I really don't care about the mystery, even though it's still interesting, it's still part of the plot. And in this case, it was in the reverse. I knew who would be killed even before the person was killed. I knew why the person would be killed, and I knew who would kill the person. I just didn't know the manner, basically. So I figured it out really, really early on. But it didn't diminish my pleasure. I still enjoyed a lot being in Shrewsbury. I still enjoyed being with Brother Cadfael. And there's always a love story in it. There's a subplot, a side story that is a love story, which was really nice, as always. So I really enjoyed it. So after that, I read another book that I will talk about in a couple of seconds. But after that second book, I wanted more Brother Cadfael. So I read the third book in that tome, and the third one is The Virgin in the Ice. This one I did not figure out. It was a mystery that remained mysterious for me until the end. And also at the end, there was I don't know if I can call it a plot twist, but a revelation of some sort. Some information was given that was absolutely wonderful. I just loved it. Now, I don't know if that information will carry over in the future books, because it could remain isolated. It could remain just told in there, we know that, and that's it. We don't do anything with it. But it could carry over to the next book or some future books in the series. And I would very much like that. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the revelation will have some consequences in the next books. And I do have the next book. So this is an omnibus. It's the second omnibus with books 4, 5, and 6 in the series. And I do have the third omnibus too with books 7, 8, and 9 in the series. So I will probably read some more Brother Cadfael. Maybe not in December though, because I like to space them out so that I still have something when the mood strikes. But yes, the Brother Cadfael is still as adorable and as cozy and as nice to read as it was. It's great. Now, the book that I read in between the 2 Cadfaels, it was a reread. It was The Lady's Paradise by Zola. Just right before I started rereading that, I had seen a tag. Was it a tag? A video by Steve Donahue, who he simply talked about, where he simply talked about his favorite book. And he invited us to talk about our favorite book of all time in less than 15 minutes. Just one favorite book of all time. And I thought this would be a candidate for me. I thought it would be fun to do a video about my favorite book of all time, and I thought this would be a candidate, but I wanted to reread it first because The Lady's Paradise, the main character is Denise. Denise Baudu. She is a 20-year-old girl who arrives from Normandy in Paris with her 2 younger brothers. One is 16 and the other one is 5 years old. And they arrive at hoping to find a place with their uncle. Their uncle owns a fabric store in Paris, and up to a few years ago, it was quite prosperous, and he had told Denise, if you ever need a job, come and see me, I'll get you one. And the problem is that right across the street from the uncle's shop, there's this great big department store that is open, and that is the Lady's Paradise. And the owner of the Lady's Paradise is a young man called Octave Mouret. Now, Octave Mouret is also a character in the previous Rougon-Macquart series. So this is part of a series. All the books can be read independently. You really don't have to read them in order at all. But the previous book in the series also features Octave Mouret, and in that previous book, he is despicable. And I was wondering, knowing what I know about the character, would I still like him in this book? Because he is a very important part of this book. He is the male protagonist of this book. Not that it's necessarily not that both characters, Denise and Octave, are portrayed equally in the book at all. It's not a love story. As always with Zola, it's not so much. It's not a romantic book. It's a realistic book, and in the book, Zola wanted to portray the newcomers, which was the opening of department stores that was revolutionizing the way of shopping in Paris and everywhere in Europe and eventually the world. Because at the time, when you wanted a dress, when you wanted a new dress, you went to the fabric store, and then you went to the haberdashery store, and then you went perhaps to the lace store if you wanted some lace on your gown, and then you took all of that to the seamstress, and then if you wanted gloves and shoes, you went to the glove maker and to the shoemaker, and then if you wanted an umbrella, you went to the umbrella maker. So it was all a bunch of different shops. But with the great department stores, everything was sold in one place, and of course, people liked it. So this is the reality that is portrayed in the Lady's Paradise. It's the arrival of these massive stores, department stores, who are ruining the little shop owners, who are completely changing the ways of Parisians, the way they buy things. So this is the main crux of this book, and as I said, I was afraid I wouldn't like Octave Mouret as much as I had in previous reads, because now I know who he is. But it turns out that it doesn't make that much of a difference, because in this book, when we meet Mouret, he is a widower. And that means that in the gap between the previous book and this book, there are several years. I don't know exactly how many. I don't know if it's 5 or 8 years or 10 years, but it's a significant amount of time. And in that amount of time, Mouret has become a grown-up. He's not a kid anymore. He's not. He's still arrogant. He still has a lot of contempt for women, but at the same time, he is a better man, because his wife made him a better man. She was a good woman, and she showed him aspects of life that he probably had never thought about when he was a young bachelor. So he is a much better man, so I do like Octave Mouret. What I like a little less, that I didn't remember, was how sexist and misogynist it was. Women in general are portrayed as vain, as ready to do anything to get their hands on stuff they want. And that could be as much people, men, lovers, as things, everything that the Lady's Paradise sells. So that aspect I found a little less palatable. So for that reason, it's not my favorite book of all time. I think I have another favorite book. I would have to reread it just to be sure. But it's still one of my favorite books. I still really love it. I love the descriptions in there. I love the character of Denise. She is a little nothing when she arrives in Paris. She is small, teeny tiny, shy, easily bullied, but she hangs on. She's tougher than she looks like. She doesn't yield easily, and she can be stubborn when it's necessary. And she's a great character. And Octave Mouret is not bad. He's not bad either. And I love the store, the descriptions. I just love them. Of course, if you don't like descriptions, well, I suggest not reading 19th century French authors. They really do love descriptions. But I did love the descriptions. So this was a wonderful reread. And the other book I have finished, it's more than I thought. At first I thought, I'm doing so many videos this month, I won't have time to read anything. But it turns out that I do have some time to read. The other book that I finished it just yesterday. It's House of Crows by Edeana Malcolm. I'm willing to bet you've never heard of it. On Goodreads, there was, the last time I checked, just one review. It's not mine. I haven't written it yet. But there's just one review, one rating of that book. And it's a 5-star review. The person who wrote it obviously adored the book. I liked it very much. I cannot say that I adored it, but I liked it. It is a historical novel. It is set in it's a multiple timeline book. So there's a timeline that starts in 1852 when the eldest woman, Edie, the eldest, I'm going to call her the matriarch, is moving from Scotland to Vancouver Island. So we meet them on the boat. They are crossing from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, all the way at the tip of Argentina and Chile today, so at the tip of South America. So it's a very, very long journey, very harrowing, and she's there with her husband and her 3 children, including Lucy, who will be our second main character. So that will be the second generation we will follow. Lucy and Edie are in the same timeline. So yeah, I'll talk about it a bit later about the construction of the book. And the third character we see will be the daughter of Lucy, and for her we are in the timeline of 1890 something. So it starts in 1891, I think. Yes, 1891, and then we follow her until 1897 or 1898. So there are 2 timelines, and for each chapter there are 3 at least, well, sometimes 2, sometimes 4, but generally 3 sub-chapters, 1 for each of our main characters. So 1 for Edie, the matriarch, 1 for Lucy, her daughter, and 1 for Maggie, who is the granddaughter. So the structure of the book is that yeah, for each chapter there are sub-chapters, and the author the publisher perhaps very kindly tells us who's the main character, in what year we are, and there are the birds here to show us who we are talking about, just to make sure, in case we don't remember who's Lucy, who's Maggie. So here's for Lucy. Lucy's the middle one. And as you can see, there are two crows and 1 magpie. The 2 crows are Edie and Lucy, because when we meet them in 1891, they are both widows, so they are dressed in black. Maggie in 1891 is 16 years old, 17 years old, and she just started working as a maid. So her outfit is black, but she has a white apron and a white cap. So she's not completely a crow, she's just a magpie. So that's the reason for the title, and that's the reason for the birds. And the story that we follow is that of the 3 women. So there's Edie with her very, very difficult life, leaving Scotland because of the potato famine, arriving in Vancouver Island that is still, I'm going to say in pristine condition, but they were hired to be farmers. Her husband is supposed to be an indentured laborer for 5 years. So for 5 years, he will do back-breaking work for someone else. And then after 5 years, he's supposed to be given his own land, which happens. He gets his own land, but then he has to start over again. He's supposed to be a farmer, but he's given a piece of forest. So it's very, very difficult work. And the husband is not very reliable. We find it quite soon, so I'm not really spoiling anything by saying that. So it's Edie who has all the burden of raising the family and figuring out how the kids are going to eat and how they will survive. So that is the fascinating story. At the same time, whenever we have a chapter about Edie, we have a chapter about Lucy at the same time. So when we arrive, when Edie arrives in North America, Lucy is just 2 years old. So it's not particularly interesting. So that's the thing that I didn't like about the book, is that whenever it's Edie and Lucy, when Edie's story was interesting, Lucy was not that interesting because she was too young. And when Lucy's story got more interesting, it was Edie's story that was less interesting because the hardships perhaps were not as hard. She had gone through things were going better. So there was a bit of this lack of balance, or perhaps, I don't know how to call it, but the fact that when one person's story is interesting, the other one is a bit less. And then there's Maggie that I never really quite got. I never really understood. Maggie is a maid. We are given to understand that she was raised in very different circumstances from Lucy, of course, because Lucy grew up in that semi-forest, in these bare bones, very rudimentary conditions. As for Maggie, she was raised in the city of Victoria. So it's a very different upbringing. And we are given to understand that she was a bit spoiled. But it's still a bit baffling that that Maggie at the age of 16 or 17 cannot cook. There's a scene at some point where Maggie can't cook, not even make cucumber sandwiches, not even make a basic cake. And that is very surprising given that she was raised by her grandmother who could do anything. And her mother, who at 10 years old had to help with cooking and everything. So it's quite surprising that she doesn't know how to cook. Lucy is a very skilled seamstress. And apparently Maggie doesn't know how to sew either. She has no skills. So there's that I don't quite understand, this difference between why Maggie would be so incompetent in everything when both her mother and her grandmother could have easily taught her these skills. So there's that thing that I don't really understand. And yeah, so maybe for that reason I didn't really warm up to Maggie. But anyway, it doesn't matter. At the end of the book, I cried. And I cry for happy things and I cry for sad things. So I'm not telling you if it's a happy ending or a sad ending. I cried twice. So it was still a good book. It worked. Even though I could see there are these teeny tiny things I don't really agree with, it was still a very good book. So yeah, I'm going to be the second person to leave a review of that on Goodreads. So that is what I have finished. What I am reading currently is, of course, the Iliad. Now, this is my, it's not the main copy that I use. I use mainly an electronic version with the Robert Graves translation, which is entitled The Anger of Achilles. But I still refer to the verse version here by Fitzgerald. So I'm still reading this. I'm reading one chapter a day very regularly. So if this video is posted on the 17th, it means that I am reading the 17th chapter on that day. Also, after finishing House of Crows, I started this, which is a Louise Penny, which is All the Devils Are Here. But I barely had time to read 20 pages yesterday. And this morning I received an email saying that a bunch of books that I put on hold at the library were available for pickup. So I went to pick them up. I don't know which ones I will read, if I will read all of them, but I am interested in all of them. So possibilities that I may perhaps will be reading. There is The Last Emperor of Mexico here by Edward Shawcross. It's about Emperor Maximilian, the brother of Francis Joseph of Austria, who was convinced to become Emperor of Mexico, and it all ended very badly for him, unfortunately. So there's that. There is The Confidence Men by Margaret Fox. This one, I saw a review by Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads, and it sounded very interesting. It's about prisoners of war during the First World War, or the Second. I think it's the First. World War I. And they escaped, apparently, in a very spectacular way. And the third possibility is Every Day the River Changes by Jordan Salama. It is a journey down the Magdalena River in Colombia. So some armchair travel. So those are the possibilities for next week and the next few weeks probably. I don't know what I will read. So that is it. That is it for me. That is what I had to say for this most recent edition of Recent Reads. And yep, I'll see you in the next video, which should be tomorrow. If I'm still vlogmasing, I still am. I still have things to say. So thank you everyone for watching. I will see you in the next video. À la prochaine!